Greetings YouTube, this is Sweet Beats from Sweet Beats Textop, and we're going to talk today about an issue somebody posted on a web forum that they're having with their Tascam M-512 mixing console. And we're just going to look at the manual today. I guess I just wanted to walk people through a little bit about what I do and what many others do when they have problems with their audio device and they need to troubleshoot. This is the operations and service manual for the Tascam M512 and M520. A lot of this applies to the M50 also. There are some distinct differences between the M500 series and the M50, but there's a whole lot more that's similar or identical between those two series than there is that's different. So this could apply to you too. So anyway, this individual posted on the web forum they're having problems with channel 3. They would plug a mic or plug a line level input into channel 3 of their mixing console. Look, here's an M512 right here. So they would plug an input into channel 3, and even if they would crank the trim level and the overload LED was going bonkers, they were assigning it to one of the program groups and the meter was just like super weak and it sounded like butt. So they posted and they said, this is happening and I'm not sure what to do. Can you help? And I said, okay. So when there's a problem like this, like I really like troubleshooting mixing consoles a whole lot more than tape machines, simply because we're just talking about audio pathways, just like signal paths. And when you get into a tape machine, then you've got all of the electromechanics too, you know, motors, and you've got the mechanical aspect of the tape path and tape alignment and all of that. But on a mixing console, it's just signal. So anyway, and the first thing that I like to do, so anyway, again, this is the operations and service manual. If you don't have one of these for your vintage analog mixing console, you really want it. Everything you need to know about that device is probably in there. Everything you need to know in order to like fix a problem that you have with it is probably in there. And the first thing I do is I flip to a thing called the block diagram. And the block diagram, all that is, aside from it just looking like overwhelming, but it is a pictographic representation of the entire signal pathway in your mixing console. So like this is the M520 block diagram. Let's see. Here's the M512 block diagram. I'm referencing the M520 block diagram. There's enough that's the same about this that we can figure out our problem the same way. But block diagram typically has all of your inputs along the left-hand side. So you can simply, like if you want to know, like, let me use my little pointer here. If you want to know where the microphone input goes on any of the input channels, and like this is channels 1 and 2, channels 3 and 4 here, 5 through 16. It's all labeled. It's like an open book test. You just have to look at it for a little while. But here's the mic input, and it goes in. We have phantom power, and then we have this pad that's there. Triangles mean amplifiers. So this is the mic amplifier and the trim, and we've got the phase reverse. You can just walk through it, and then it's like super helpful if you look at the block diagram and you have the actual device in front of you, because then you can be like, oh, mic, instrument, tape, oh yeah, there's a switch. Okay, this is the picture of the switch, the source select switch. So anyway, so this person was having this issue with channel 3. So I guess we'll just look at channel 3. And they were like, I plug a mic in, or I plug a line level source into the tape in, and when I assign that to one of the program groups. Oh, look, here's all the program groups. The signal is really low. So I just start walking through and try and find places where we can access the signal in between that input and where the operator is saying they're having problems. So they were saying, so here are the program group output jacks, and here are the program group faders and the fader booster and the output amplifier. Anyway, so you know, this particular M512 owner is saying, look, bad signal here when I plug an input in here or here. So then I just start asking questions like, okay, well, you said that the let's see, where is the, here is the let's see, not there. Oh yeah, here's the overload LED. He said, you know, this thing is going bonkers. I got plenty of signal there, but I don't have anything hardly all the way out here. So I can just like look at that. This is the amplifier. There's a little amplifier for the overload LED, and that just comes right off of here, off of the send jack. So on the M500 series and on the M50, you've got these jumpers on the back that are labeled access, send, receive. A more contemporary term for this is insert. But rather than it being like a TRS unbalanced insert point and you'd get an insert cable, the M500 series and the M50 have this jumper and these RCA jacks. So you have the send and you have the receive. So if you got good signal here, I was like, okay, well, what happens if you plug into this access point or the send jack, pull the jumper out and plug into the send jack? What do you have? And he's like, I've got really good signal there. And I'm like, okay. So now we've eliminated the head amp, the mic amp, or the line amp on the tape return. We've eliminated that because he's got good signal here. So now we can forget about all this. So again, it's just a process of like trying to narrow in where could the problem be. And we can do a lot on some of these older mixing consoles that have a lot of patch points or routing flexibility. We can access the signal at different points just by using our ears and a signal source. So then I was like, well, okay, we talked through. So let's just follow through here. This is the EQ section. We've got our aux sends, and we have different source options for the aux sends. We have pre and post and tape. I asked some questions around, does it make any difference if the EQ is on or off? Because the M500 series and the M50 have a switch that you can, it's like a hard bypass, and here's that switch right here, a hard bypass past the EQ section, so your signal just totally bypasses the EQ section. He says, no, it doesn't make any difference. I asked questions around what is the signal like if you monitor your aux out, like let's just say aux 1 or aux 2. So I said, hey, plug your monitor, whatever you're using to monitor, plug it in here, or in some way monitor the output of one of the pairs of aux buses. And let's switch the source to pre-fader. How is it there? Switch it to post-fader. How is it there? Because in pre-fade mode, it accesses the signal right off of the receive jack. See this line? And it comes right here to pre, and then that goes through the aux send, and then that goes out here. Let's see, where did it go? Goes over here to your aux masters. So, and he said, you know, it's okay in pre and in post, But this operator did a really smart thing, and he said, you know, but I'm going to check the same thing on channel 2, a channel that's working. And he said, I did the same thing on channel 2, and it's like way better at the pre-stage than it is on channel 3. So there's some other troubleshooting we did around direct out, because, you know, I'm like, hey, we can access the signal here. This is the channel fader and the fader booster amp. So this is a post fader point that we can check. We've got a post fader point that we can check on the aux bus. But we did all that, and he's like, yeah, it sucks at the direct out jack, and you know, it's okay in pre and post, but it's not really that great. And when I compare to channel 2 pre and post, it's like way better there. So then I'm like, so we're like even not getting very good signal pre-fader. So remember, again, here is the input fader, and that the source of the input fader is either post EQ, or if the EQ isn't on, it goes right back here to right after this receive jack. And remember, I said the pre-fade source select for the aux bus comes off of that same point. So I'm like, if he's getting bad signal right from where the receive jack comes in, and he said it doesn't make any difference if he turns the EQ on and off, we have a problem somewhere in between the receive jack and this pre-fade access, whether it's, you know, right here, right before the input fader when the EQ is off, or in pre-mode. So I hope you guys are following me. Again, we're just looking at the block diagram. This is a simplified schematic, basically, a pictographic representation of the entire signal path of your console. And if you just spend some time and look at it with the console in front of you, you can just follow through. It's like it's open book. Okay. So now, and this is how my process is, now that we've kind of narrowed down to somewhere in here, I'm like, okay, now we need to drill down. And this is the part where everybody goes, oh no, I'm melting. Here comes the schematic. Okay, but all this is like zooming in. So now, right here, what we have, this is the input amplifier PCB, the channel card, okay, right? The PCB that is one of the channel strips. And if we keep going in our operations and service manual, we get to a page, input amplifier. This is now just zooming in, and I realize like this might be kind of overwhelming for some people, but all we're doing is zooming in and getting a little more detail. But we've still got the same elements. Like look, we have inputs along the left-hand side of the schematic, and those go through to our outputs. This is our bus assignments, and let's see, what else do we have? We have the PFL bus, we have the solo bus. So again, yeah, it's more detailed, it's more complicated. So you got inputs on the left, you got outputs on the right, and like this is the direct out jack. This says access send, access receive. It's all the same things we were just looking at in the block diagram. It's just in more detail. So don't get overwhelmed by the detail. Here is the mic input. This is the mic amplifier. This is the mic amp right here. And remember, triangles mean amplifiers. So these triangles in the M500 series consoles and the M50, these represent op amps. Okay, op amp is short for operational amplifier, and in the M500 series and the M512, op amps are provided by integrated circuits, ICs, chips. Okay, so you can look on the channel card and you can see these chips, and those are the op amps, and they're dual op amps. Each chip has actually 2 amplifiers in it. So that's why this is like, and you probably can't see this detail, and I'm not going to be able to focus in on it, but this says U1 amplifiers in a schematic diagram. There's like a letter and a number designator. Each part has a letter and a number. Transistors are typically represented by the letter Q, and we'll have, you know, here's Q1, here's Q2, Q3, Q4. Resistors are represented by R and then some number. This is a diode. Diodes are represented by a D and some number. Like they number them on the printed circuit board, the PCB assembly, so that you can find them. Okay, this is all like roadmap stuff. And then capacitors. Here's a capacitor, and those are represented by the letter C and some number. And so you start to see these symbols, you know, okay, the squiggly thing is a resistor. These 2 lines, one straight, one curved, that's a polar capacitor. And then we have non-polar capacitors, which are represented by just 2 straight lines. Transistors look like these guys. Amplifiers look like these guys. And it's a dual op amp, so we have U1, 2 of 2. Here's U1, 1 of 2. So this is the first side of that dual op amp. This is the second side. Okay. Hopefully I didn't lose you. But again, this is the mic amp. And remember, when we were looking at our block diagram, we had our mic jack, and we went in here, and then we just had this triangle amplifier. Now we're just zooming in, and here's all the detail inside that mic amp. So anyway, let's go back and remember, I was like, okay, receive jack. It's bad between anything that we can monitor pre-fade, or whether it's the pre-fade, aux send, I guess that was it. Oh, and then we also have the PFL monitor, pre-fade listen. That was the other place that it was bad. I said, hey, well, what is it like in PFL and what is it like in solo? And he's like, you know, it's pretty bad on both of those. So PFL was bad, and in the pre-fade source select and the aux bus it was bad. So something in between here. So I just go to the schematic and I go, okay, so where's the receive jack on the schematic? And it's right here. So I'm just going to follow that. Access receive, and we get to an amplifier. The first thing it comes to is an amplifier, an op amp. It's U5. It's a TL072 op amp. And this is a buffer amplifier. And we know that because it doesn't have any gain. I won't get into the details in this here about how we can tell that, but it's a buffer amp for this, basically this input, the receive jack. And then the output, so these triangles, the input is on the flat side, the output is always the point. And this buffer amp, the output goes into, this is the EQ section. So we've got additional amplifiers for each of the stages of the EQ section. The high filter, mid filter, low filter. So it goes that way, but look, it also goes here, goes 2 places. This is just going to ground there, it's ground reference. We're just following it along, right? Just follow the line. Where does it go? Oh, here's the EQ on switch. Okay, so the output of U5, this receive jack buffer amp, feeds either the EQ section, or if the EQ section is off, it goes down to the EQ switch and then on to let's see, and then so it comes in here, or one side comes post EQ, and then we go to the direct out jack and other places. So I'm like, this is the only active device. And this particular owner of this M512, I'll just say in my experience, what they were describing sounded to me like maybe a bad op amp. I'm not positive. But this is the only active device, in other words, only amplifier or powered component, because op amps are powered. This pin 4 is powered by the audio power rails, but it's the only one that's there. So my recommendation to this M512 owner is to pull channel 3 and either if he or she has this skill to get out your oscilloscope or your signal generator and start tracing out the signal around this area and seeing where the signal gets bad. Do you have good signal at pin 3 of U5? That's the input. Now how does the signal look at pin 1, which is the output of this section of U5, this dual op amp? And just start tracing the signal out. But we use the block diagram and the schematic to hone in or zone in on what area likely the problem exists. And if the operator doesn't have an oscilloscope or signal generator or these other tools or instruments to troubleshoot and diagnose, my recommendation is, well, you can just start shotgunning parts if you want. And in my experience, what he's experiencing sounds like a bad op amp. So if it was me and I didn't have the experience, I didn't have the tools, I'd pull channel 3 and I would buy myself a new Texas Instruments TL072. They're cheap and they're readily available from lots of online vendors. And I would get up my soldering iron and replace U5 and see if that fixed the problem. But if you do have a tone generator, and the console has an onboard tone generator, you could inject tone into the receive jack and just start tracing out and probing before this coupling capacitor C25 and after the coupling capacitor at the input of U5, which is pin 3. You could always also check and make sure that U5 is getting good power, that there's not a problem there. You know, you can just start probing around. But again, the point of what I'm trying to show you is the manual has the things that you need to be able to follow along and at least kind of zero in and then zoom in using the schematic diagram and start getting into the nitty-gritty of where might this problem be. I suspect U5 is bad. Don't know for sure. You could shotgun it, replace it, maybe that fixes it, and we're on our way. And if not, it's got to be somewhere, either a broken trace, cold solder joint, something like that, somewhere in here. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like this kind of stuff, please subscribe to my channel. Feel free to put up questions if you have them. I do try and monitor that and respond to questions that folks have. So again, thank you for watching and I hope this was helpful.